welcome to another episode of the Laughter for All podcast. I am comedian Nazar. Thank you for joining us. It is so good to see that people are watching from all over the world and actually listening. We have actually people from Thailand, people from Pakistan, from Nepal, from France, from South Africa, Canada, England. We had people from Germany. So this is awesome that you guys are watching Dubai, Hong Kong. This is awesome that you guys are have been following this podcast and watching the last 85 shows, and we never fail to please you with great guests. And today is no exception. I have a friend. I call him a friend. And when I mention that I'm his friend, I feel better about myself because this guy is one of the legends, the pillars of the stand up comedy. He started back in 1975 and doing comedy in New York. He's originally from Boston, so he has to be Catholic, of course, and he graduated from a university that I'm honored that I spoke at, Notre Dame University. And let me introduce him officially. Jimmy Brogan, sometimes credited as Jim Brogan, is an American stand-up comedian, writer, and actor. He has made numerous stand-up appearances on the talk show circuit, including The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. See, we're talking Johnny now. Johnny Carson, Late Night with David Letterman. He was a writer on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno for 9 years. As an actor, he starred in the ABC sitcom Out of the Blues. The LA Times, Los Angeles Times has called Brogan an absolute master at interacting with the crowd. And I bet you every stand-up comedian who've seen Jimmy perform would tell you that. He is the absolute master at interacting with the crowd. I say, oh, I'm great with the crowd. I can do a whole hour with the crowd, but nothing like Jim Brogan. And says he elevated crowd interaction to a high art. He did. Brogan started doing stand up in comedy in New York City in 75. Within his first year and a half of doing stand up, he was a regular performer at the Improv, Catch a Rising Star, and Comic Strip. Brogan guest starred on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson 7 times. 7 times. I can't even get there once. That was my dream to go once. 7 times from 84 to 92. He also appeared on The Late Night with David Letterman and The Merv Griffin Show. Alrighty. So please welcome my friend, Mr. Jimmy Brogan. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nazareth. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, and honored to be your friend.
Thank you so much. So, how you doing with this COVID? How is things going with you?
It's good. I'll tell you the sad thing about it to me is my life hasn't changed one bit because of COVID. Sitting at home watching TV all day, I've been for my entire life. This is, my life hasn't changed a bit. So
it hasn't changed. You've been sitting home watching the. And you're a single guy. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And you have a great book about being a lifelong bachelor. So we'll get to that. But you were born in Boston, right? What did your dad do? What did your parents do?
I was born in Boston, but we moved to Cleveland when I was 6. So I really grew up in Cleveland. Yeah. And my dad sold landing gear, airplane landing gear. Yeah. Door to door. So that was a problem. But yeah.
Okay, that was yeah.
But yeah, he worked for a company called the Cleveland Pneumatic Tool Company, and they sold landing gear to all the major airlines and the Air Force.
So you grew up in Cleveland. So you were a Cleveland Browns fans.
Sure, yeah, grew up, with the Browns.
And you went to Cedar Point. Did you go to Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio?
Yes, we went one time when I was a kid, and that was a big deal to go on the Wild Mouse ride. And they had that ride where the room spun around and then the floor dropped out and you end up being stuck to the wall. Did you ever go on that? I can't think. Tilt-a-whirl, sometimes it was called.
I remember that, like the dryer, like a sock on a dryer.
That's right.
And also, did you go fishing in Port Clinton on the lake?
And we did.
Lake Erie.
Because we lived in Boston when I was a kid, my parents had built a cottage on Cape Cod. And so even though we lived in Cleveland, we went to Cape Cod every summer and spent the summer on Cape Cod. And my dad would fly down every weekend from Cleveland uh, to Cape Cod to be with us and then fly back Sunday night. So he spent the entire weekend flying. It was the craziest thing. I don't know why my parents didn't
Did
go,
he
okay, we'll
did
build
he
a cottage.
yeah, did he complain about the landing when the planes came down or no?
No, I guess he trusted it. Yeah, they would land okay with it. He's checking the landing gear before he took off. Yeah.
Now, your parents, were they religious Catholics? Were they just
Oh,
okay?
yes. Oh no, very religious. My mother, her mother passed away when she was young. So she
Oh,
was sent to convent school. So she was raised by nuns. So
oh,
she was very religious. And I'll tell you how religious they were. Uh, we weren't allowed to watch Frank Sinatra movies when I was a kid because Frank Sinatra was Catholic and he had been divorced. We weren't
oh.
allowed even to see divorced people on TV. Is
that
how
that would work during COVID. You can stay home and not see any. Oh, wow! So she was very strict in.
very, very, very much strict and very Catholic. And she had seen during World War II, my parents lived out here in California, and they had seen Bob Hope do one of his shows for the troops
Mm.
at one of the army bases out here. And he had told an off-color joke. And my mother worried about these poor soldiers that were going into battle and perhaps losing their lives with this sin on their soul. So
Oh,
we could never watch Bob Hope movies. She didn't like Bob Hope, who was, a really mainstream, clean TV comedian, basically. Uh, we couldn't watch that.
wow!
And do you know the movie Miracle on 34th Street?
Yes.
A great, wonderful fantasy kids movie, that everyone loves, and it's a wonderful, sweet movie. We weren't allowed to watch that
I guess
because
you did. You watched it, didn't you?
well, I'll tell you, eventually, the woman who has the daughter that goes to meet Santa Claus in the movie, she's divorced, so we weren't allowed to watch this movie because she was divorced. So my mother, and this is how liberal she was, she would not let us watch the first 10 minutes when they talked about her being divorced, but we could watch the rest of the movie. So it wasn't until about 2 years ago, I was at Jay Leno's for Christmas and Christmas dinner, and he showed Miracle on 34th Street. And for the first time, I saw the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Was your dad like that? Was he strict? Was your dad strict or not? Not as much.
My dad was strict and very Catholic too. And I'll tell you a great thing actually about my dad is he raised money to redo the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine
Oh.
Chapel over the years had
Mm.
they've been burning candles and incense and all that stuff, and it had darkened all the paintings that Michelangelo had done. And so my dad raised money uh, and gave money for the restoration of the Sistine Chapel, which took place maybe in the 90s. And I said to him one time, he said, "Oh, they let me clean some of the ceiling." And I said, "Oh, they let you clean some of the ceiling? That's how much money he raised for that." Yeah, I said, "What part did you clean?" He said, "Where God and Adam are touching fingers."
Oh,
Um,
that's a big one.
I mean, the most famous part of the Sistine Chapel. They let him clean where they're touching fingers with a little sponge, and so there's if you ever go to the Sistine Chapel, there's a little sacristy in the back that has a plaque with my dad's name on it.
I
My
was there in 4 years ago. I was there. I didn't, but I didn't look for the.
well, I don't know if you can get into the back, but so Michelangelo's name is nowhere, but my dad's name is there in the chapel.
So so he's the one that cleaned the kind of the interaction, the connection between God and Adam. It was your dad that
Yes.
yeah, arranged for that, cleaned
Yeah.
it up.
So, I mean, a wonderful thing. And if you're religious or not religious, it's an amazing piece of art. That you've seen it, Nazareth, and it's,
Yeah.
every inch of the walls and ceiling are covered with uh, historical, biblical figures and stuff. It's just an amazing thing that. that he did that will go on now for hopefully centuries more.
So you have nothing left in the will for you, right?
It's true. My dad gave away almost every penny he earned selling landing gear. Yeah.
Now, you say a funny thing. You had the funniest, like something about the autograph. What was that joke about the nun? You went to Catholic school, right?
Oh, I did go to Catholic school, yeah, and some of the
But
nuns
you
were
did.
old.
You
Yes.
did,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yes, and some of the nuns were old. We had one of those real old boys, Sister Cecilia. She had a picture of Christ that was autographed.
I love it. That's how old. She got
That's
an
all.
autograph picture from Jesus. So you did go to Catholic school yourself.
Yes, yes. I went to grade school, high school, Notre Dame for 6 years. Yeah, I mean, it was all Catholic school. Yeah.
What did you study at Notre Dame? What was your major?
I was a sociology major, and
Hmm.
not because I had any interest in sociology, but my roommate was a sociology major, and he made out my schedule every year, what class I would take.
So you
That's
took
how
such a.
uninterested I was. And I also went to graduate school at Notre Dame, and they finally kicked me out after a couple of years because I organized a kissing marathon on the main quad. And at Notre Dame, this did not go over well. That we
They let you go.
they did that. They thought I wasn't taking my studies seriously.
Now, when did you find out that you wanted to become a comedian?
Well, my first that same weekend as the kissing marathon, uh, I was on the spring weekend committee. In my early years of Notre Dame, there was a prom in the spring, a very formal kind of thing. And then a friend of mine, Dave Ryan, started a kind of an alternative uh, spring weekend that would just be fun stuff where you'd have a pie eating contest and we chased greased pigs and that sort of thing. Had chariot races and kind of just fun kind of college things. And I was on the committee doing the publicity for it, and I said to the chairman, I had a friend who lived down the hall from me in the dorm who did an impression of Ed Sullivan. You know,
Mm.
right there on our stage. He very funny impression, made me laugh. And I thought, oh, if there's a kid in my dorm that's funny like that and does an impression, there's probably kids in every dorm that do that. So why don't we have a contest to
Mm.
have people do impressions? And no one thought much of the idea. And the chairman, who Dave Ryan had graduated at that point, the chairman said to me, "Well, if you run it, you can do that contest." Okay, so I figured, there'll be five of us under a tree, and I'll hand out a ribbon to the, that's impressionist. And so the day of the contest, it was right after lunch. I walk out on the South Quad at Notre Dame, which is a big quad with all the dorms in it. And the chairman has gotten a stage that he set up on the middle of the quad and a full sound system. And there's 1,000 kids sitting there waiting for the contest.
Oh no.
And yeah, and I had never been on stage before, I never performed, and I had to MC this thing. So I MC'd this contest, my first performing, MC'd the contest. And in the middle of the contest, Father Hesburgh, who was the president of Notre Dame at the time and was very well known. He was on the Civil Rights Commission and not only president of Notre Dame, but also a real activist in other uh, things, religious and not religious. I mean, and so he was always traveling and stuff. So there was a big joke on campus at Notre Dame of what's the difference between God and Father Hesburgh? And the answer is God is everywhere. Father Hesburgh is everywhere but Notre Dame. So that was the big deal. So we just we never really never saw the president. And so in the middle of this contest, I'm up on stage, and Father Hesburgh walks
Oh.
by. Yeah, and so I say, ladies and gentlemen, here's Father Hesburgh, and gets applause. And I said, or maybe that's Father Burchill doing an impression of Father Hesburgh. And in the middle of this impression contest, I had ad-libbed something and it got a laugh. And with that notion that I had gotten one little laugh on one little ad-lib, when I went to New York, I thought to myself, maybe I could try stand-up comedy.
Mm.
So
And you went to New York deliberately to do comedy, right?
no, I had gone there to do volunteer work for a guy named Allard Lowenstein, who was a fascinating guy. He was a guy who was a congressman, but he had organized back in 1968 the Dump Johnson movement. This is when Lyndon Johnson was president. And he had
Mm.
organized how to unseat a sitting president. And he had gotten Eugene McCarthy to run. And and eventually LBJ said, I'm not going to run for re-election, and dropped out. And then Bobby Kennedy came in the race, and Nixon eventually won. But so a fascinating political figure, and he was running for Congress in Brooklyn. So I went to work for him for a month, and that turned into 2.5 years of just doing volunteer work, of driving him around to his speeches and gigs and meetings and stuff. Uh,
Wow.
and then when he lost his third election in a row with my help,
That kind of was a hint for you, right?
he said, "You're going to have to do something else." And I went and stood in line at Catch a Rising Star, which was a big nightclub in New York,
Right.
and did my first solo stand up. Yeah, the next week after he lost. And absolutely bombed, by the way, for any comedians listening who think, "Oh, it's easy." It was so frightening. I had no idea how bright the lights would be, and I had no
Mm.
idea how to adjust the mic stand. And the MC was much shorter than me, so
Oh no.
I was kind of bent over and covered my eyes, and just bombed. I did an impression of a priest from Notre Dame, which kind of got laughs in Notre Dame, but in New York it meant nothing
Didn't matter, right?
to anyone. Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes. Good evening and welcome to 5 o'clock mass. It just meant nothing to the people.
So, so what made you go back on stage the second time after that horrible beginning?
Well, the second time was the next night. Here's how deluded I was, that I thought, well, that was a bad crowd. So I went to another club the next night, Folk City down in the village, which was a folk music club, really. But you could pick a number out and go on stage on their open mic night. And so I went and bombed the second time and thought, oh, that's not good. But at that exact time, Dick Cavett, I don't know if you know who Dick Cavett
Yeah,
is.
yes, I had.
He was a talk show host that rivaled Johnny Carson for a short time in the early 70s. Uh, and he came out with a book at that point. And this was
Mm.
before the internet, where you could, if you wanted to learn comedy, you could watch, on the internet, you could watch 100 comedians,
Right.
and then they list another 100 more you could, But back then it was really hard. There were 3 TV channels. And if you didn't happen to be home at that point with the TV on that station, you would miss that comedian forever. You would never, So it was hard to learn anything about comedy. And
Right.
Dick Cavett came out with a book about his life and how he started as a stand-up comic. And I had been doing volunteer work at $20 a week uh, for for 2.5 years. So I was completely broke. I couldn't afford the $8.95 for the book, and my dad said, "Oh, why don't you drive my car to Florida for me for the winter?" My parents had just started to go to Florida for the winters from Cleveland. And so I drove down to Florida, and rather than um, getting a motel room in North Carolina one night, I slept in the car so I could get the $8.95. So
Oh,
when I arrived in Florida, I bought Dick Cavett's book and just devoured it. I was read it and wrote my first original material about going to high school, and then went back to New York and started doing stand up full time after that.
were you
And
doing ad lib in the beginning or no? Like
no,
audience?
it was just this 5 minutes of stuff that I had written in Florida that uh, most of the jokes didn't work. I was doing jokes in Latin. It was about going to an intellectual high school. I would do jokes in Latin, uh, and the audience was just puzzled by it. But the great thing about this story is 9 years later, on my first Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the guest right ahead of me was Dick Cavett.
Wow.
Yeah, and so to perform my first Tonight Show with Johnny, obviously, and Dick Cavett sitting there and watching them applaud after I finished, and meeting Dick Cavett afterwards and thanking him for his book was, the perfect finish to that, to me starting in comedy.
So, what was your feeling first time you went on the Carson show? I mean, that's made and broke people's careers at the time. How did you feel?
It was terrifying. It was so scary, and uh, not only scary for every comedian that's done it. I remember I was there when Gary Shandling did his first appearance, and he came off. He had done well, came back through the curtain, and he collapsed into George Wallace's arms. The comedian George Wallace, not
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know.
and I mean, his legs just gave out, and he just collapsed. It was such a relief. So it was so terrifying, and in my case, I'd always done an act that dealt with the audience, where I talked to the audience a lot and then did a little material in between. But to put together 5 minutes and know I couldn't do my regular act was
Right.
particularly terrifying. And the first time that Jim McCauley saw me for the Tonight Show was I was still living in New York. This was 1979, and I'd been doing comedy about 4.5 years. And I come off stage Saturday night at the Improv, and the manager at the time, a guy named Chris Albrecht, who went on to run HBO and stuff, but he takes me aside and says, "Oh, I want you to meet Jim McCauley from the Tonight Show." And Jim McCauley says to me, "Oh, he's complimentary about my set," and he said, "You're funny." I said, "Oh, thanks." And he said, "I'd like to stay for the second show and see you do 5 minutes of material. I see you've got material, but just put 5 minutes material together." And I said, "I can't do that. I had an hour between shows, and I had to go up to Catch a Rising Star on the comic strip and do 2 shows there and then come back. And I couldn't just change my act." And so I said, "Gee, I'm sorry, I can't do that."
Ooh.
And he went out. So he said, "Thanks." He was very polite. He went out, got in a cab, and I watched my dream of the Tonight Show disappear up Ninth Avenue and just go, I just missed an opportunity there. The Tonight Show. And they never came to New York in those days and stuff. So 3 years later, I'm living out in California, and I'm working at the Comedy Store, and Jay Leno takes me aside, and Jay and I were friends, and he said, and Jay wasn't doing the Tonight Show at that point. Jay had done 4 Tonight Shows in 1978, and they, the first one, this is what Jay told me, the first one, was real funny, and then the second one, they were just too close together, and he didn't have the material to really do 4 appearances, and so they got less funny as he went along. And by the fourth one, the Tonight Show said, we don't want him back. And so Jay
Wow.
really, kind of out in the wilderness from 78 until 86, he didn't do the Tonight Show. And then he was a guest host after that. But it was really the Letterman show that, kind of brought him back all the time. So, but anyway, so in 82, so Leno takes me aside and says, "You're funny enough to the Tonight Show. You should put together 5 minutes of stuff." So I worked for 2 years on 10 minutes of material. I would try and open with it every night. And, when it wouldn't work, I'd kind of bail out of it and, talk to the audience, do my regular act. So in those 2 years, I probably did 500 shows where I just tried to do that 5 minutes or that 10 minutes of stuff. And finally, okay, 2 years doing it. I think it's ready. I bring my managers in to see it on a Monday night at the Comedy Store, and it's a noisy audience, and they're just not paying attention, and I lose my concentration, and it just doesn't work. And they go, "No, you're not using connection." So 2 years of work, down the drain. So I then flew back to New York, where I could get more stage time in the clubs, where I could do 3 sets a night on weekday nights and then 6 on weekends. And for 2 weeks, I did that 10 minutes open with it 50 more times, did 50 more appearances, and then flew back to Los Angeles and told my managers, "I'm really ready. This is just bulletproof now." And so they brought Jim McCauley in, who was the booker of the Tonight Show, and he saw the 10 minutes and said, you can do any of that 10 minutes on the show that you want, which was unusual for him because usually he would pick
Right.
and choose the material and pardon me, sometimes even rearrange it. And so,
But
uh,
you're always been clean. You've always been very clean. I've never seen you anything inappropriate. Even talking to the audience, which is harder for a lot of comedians to be clean when they're, you know, when the thought comes to your head and you you have to say it. So you were always clean. Now,
but
oh,
I agree with that. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, yeah, I'm clean and the audience is dirty, which is
yeah.
which is unusual for a club. Yeah.
Yeah. Now let me take you forward. You
But I
became
just
that.
can I just finish the
Of
I'll
course,
tell you,
of
I'll
course.
tell you what really particularly made me more nervous about the Tonight Show is Jim McCauley said, okay, do any of that 10 minutes on the show. So I whittled it down to the best 5 minutes. And, from when he approved it to when I did the show was probably a few weeks. And so I ran it every night in the clubs, that 5 minutes, got it down, shortened it a little bit, tightened it, got a 5 minute. Okay. And so my managers come in the night before I'm supposed to do the show down at the Improv, and they see the set and go, we think maybe the other 5 minutes is better.
Oh no.
Like, oh no. So we go up to the Comedy Store. I run it my final time before tonight show. I run the other 5 minutes, and I come off, and they see it and go, "Yeah, maybe you're right. Man, maybe that first 5 minutes is better." So, right before the show, they put
Oh.
this doubt in my mind. So not only am I doing, uh, an act that I mean, I've worked on, but it's not the act I've been doing for 9 years, you know, and now I don't even know I've chosen the right 5 minutes of stuff. So anyway, that was my Tonight Show experience, and it went well. And
And they
so,
invite you back 7 times.
yeah, which was very nice. And the last time I got to sit down uh, in the chair next to Johnny Carson, and have a conversation with him, which was just, you know, a thrill for every.
You know how many these are the dreams of comedians. I remember, I mean, even though I was still new, I started in 90, I was like, I want to do, oh, Johnny Carson, if I do Carson, if I do Carson. And some people did it when they were still, they're still new at it. So I was just, what do you call it? That was a dream. So then you fast forward, you're friends with Jay Leno. How did you guys become friends? Just doing stand up together? Because he's
From
from
stand,
Boston too, right?
he is from Boston, but I had moved away, as a kid, long before that, and so I really, I'd seen Jay and met him once in New York, but I don't think he remembered that. He was just uh, passing through New York when he was working and came into the Improv one night and said, "Oh, yeah, these are the new kids. Oh, yeah, these are the new kids." Yeah. And so, I mean, with the group of kids, group of newer comedians, we sat and got the wisdom from Jay one night. But so it was really when I moved to California, I was doing a TV show called Out of the Blue, where I played an angel that came down to earth and took care of some kids whose parents were killed in a plane crash. So you can
Oh,
imagine how funny that was. What a funny premise. Yeah, deadpan. So, so I was walking into the Improv, and Jay Leno's outside on his motorcycle, and he says to me, "Hey, you have to get on a TV show, huh?" So we started talking and became friends, and that was 1979, and yeah, we've been friends ever since. And I've opened for Jay down at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach every Sunday for, I don't know, 30 years, something like that.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. So
You're
every Sunday we ride to get down together in one of his cars. Yeah.
wonderful. So what kind of car you drive? Because I know Leno have like 200 cars. What kind of car you
He
drive?
does. I don't like to cheat on my car with other cars. Yeah. So I just have one. I drive a Prius, a plug-in Prius.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now you okay? So you became You and Leno, so people don't understand this if they're not in comedy. When they have the Tonight Show, people from all over the world send jokes, they fax jokes to the Tonight Show if they're approved to do that. And also, they have what 10 writers for the Tonight Show to write the monologue.
When I was there, there were 14 writers, seven of whom worked on the monologue, and the other seven worked on the other pieces that came after the monologue. Yeah,
Okay,
and for the commercial. Yeah. So seven
so
writers full time, and then people freelance stuff at that point as well to Jay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all these jokes come in. I remember I used to send jokes, and they give you
Uh,
$50 if you want. So you
Awesome.
send people send the jokes. The seven writers will look at all these jokes, pick the best one, and you and Jay has to decide which ones that go on the set. So you were like the final filtering that will make it go on the show.
Yeah, Jay and I would yeah go over every single joke. Jay would probably get 400 or 500 jokes a day from his writers and people that were like you that were sending in freelance stuff, and read through every one, check the ones he liked, which was he probably chose maybe 150 jokes that he liked
Uh-huh.
out of the ones that were submitted, and then I would sit down with him and we would whittle it down to the 25 jokes that Jay put in the monologue account, and I would go to
Every
his house every night from 10 o'clock until 2 in the morning and work on the monologue for the next day. Yeah.
So every night after the show, 10 o'clock, you go to his house. You stay
Yep.
till 2 in the morning. You get the monologue ready, and the next uh, night he performs it, and you were sitting
Well,
in the audience.
we would also add jokes in the afternoon of the show as well. I mean, Jay
Oh,
would
you
read jokes all morning, and yeah, we did about half the monologue done at night, so we had a good base that we knew we had. And then the next day we would add, probably another 10 jokes or so. So we probably have 15 going in, and then end up with around 25.
and you would sit there and watch him either bomb or get a huge applause for it.
That's right. Yeah, and go, oh, that worked, that didn't work, or yeah, yeah. And occasionally Jay would turn to me and say, Brogan, you chose wrong on that one. And we would have some bets going on the jokes. So I would have to go up and give him money, or he would give me money if it was the other way around. Often that part was cut out of the actual
Oh, they
taping,
cut
but
it off the show.
occasionally it made it in, and yeah, and I always kept $1 in my pockets, like give Jay $1, and Jay always had like 20s. So although Jay probably won more often than I did, I made a lot more money than Jay did.
So
You
now
gotta be thinking when you're doing this.
you became the talent coordinator for the show. So you were booking just comedians or all the celebrities that come on the show.
No, just comedians. Yeah, there was going to someone else who was going to book the comedians, and right before Jay took over, whoever that person was, I don't even know who it was. Didn't take the job, and they said, "Oh, will you book the comedians?" So for 5 years, yeah, I would be at the show every day until it was like 7 at night. And then I would go to the comedy clubs and do a set myself and audition comics for the show. And then at 10 o'clock, I go to Jay's house till 2 in the morning, and this was
Wow.
every day for 5 years. Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing. I
yeah.
miss I miss the show with Jay Leno. I really miss it. You were single the whole time in all this path. You have not found the right woman, but you wrote a book, and I want to show that book right
Okay,
now.
okay.
And it's called 79 Reasons You Might Be a Lifelong Bachelor. 79 Reasons You Might Be a Lifelong Bachelor. Now, that book will tell you how to get it later on Amazon and stuff. But why did you write the book, and what give us some of those 79 reasons, some of them?
Well, I was making spaghetti one night, and I had to break the spaghetti in half to fit it into the pot
Uh-huh.
because the pot was so small, and I thought, only a bachelor would live like this. Every woman I've ever known has a pot big enough to make spaghetti without breaking it in half. And I thought, and then the next day I was vacuuming the living room floor with a dustbuster, and did the whole thing with a dustbuster. And I thought, no, this is, women don't live like this. Married guys don't live like this. Just bachelors live like
Yeah.
this. I was talking to my friend Matt Wolfart, who wrote the book with me, and he had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and was single, and we would just laugh about the stupid stuff we were doing as bachelors and stuff. So we thought, oh, let's do like an old fashioned joke book, and just see. We probably wrote 150 jokes, and then cut it down to the jokes we liked the best, and it turned out to be 79 reasons. Yeah, yeah. For example, the only woman in your house is Mama Celeste. So,
That,
so those kind of jokes. So,
now, have you in your whole did you have the desire to get married? Was it a strong desire? Was there a desire to get married or no?
I think when I was in college, and I dated a terrific woman there, and thought, oh, we should get married at some point. But you know, I was really kind of lost in my career and life. I was kicked out of graduate school, and I was doing volunteer work for $20 a week. And it just looked like I was going nowhere. And I think the women lost interest pretty quickly on that. So yeah, I mean, I think early on, had I gotten married, my life would have been completely different. I would have had to probably take a whole different career course, and I couldn't have just floundered for a bunch of years, and then found at 26 my life's calling, which was stand-up comedy.
No, someone said so. You were married to your job. Can you say that?
Oh, well, I guess you could say that, but yeah, it's not been a faithful job. Yeah,
N-
in this past year. Yeah. So,
Now,
um,
now, when you're, as a comedian, I mean, I've been married 25 years, but sometimes, you finish
and
a show.
what's the secret? What's it? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what's the secret?
What is my secret? I
Yeah.
think I would say Jesus Christ is the number one secret. Number two, my wife
Um,
is very gracious
ah.
and she's too lazy to look for someone else. No, no, I'm just kidding. But my
Okay.
have you know how comedians you finish the show? I mean, we used to go when I was single. We hang out with other comedians and we talk about the show and all that. But then you get married. Sometimes you can't wait to get home and tell someone you love about how great the show was, or you get a call they want you on the Letterman and you get excited. Did you ever feel lonely?
No, I can't say that I did. I always had, a lot of friends in the comedy world. And, for a while when I lived in an apartment for a long time in West Hollywood, Seinfeld lived upstairs, and, Larry Miller was not too far away. And, we just had a zillion friends. And we would go to the comedy clubs every night and hang out with our pals. So, I never got that feeling.
Now, people don't. Some people don't understand. You were hanging out with Leno, with Seinfeld, with. Did you hang out with Robin Williams, or
Uh,
he was on your show one time, right?
Yes, I would see Robin in the clubs occasionally, and we had the same managers. Uh, so yes, and actually, when I first came out to California, I was when I was doing this show called Out of the Blue, the sitcom that I did. Uh, they had talked me into doing a big dinner at the Century Plaza Hotel.
Mm.
A big room that probably sat 600 people. And I'd only worked small clubs in New York, and my whole act was asking people where they're from and what they do for a living.
You got 600.
And this was 600 people, and it was all press. It was all, they all did the same thing for a living. And so I had turned it down 4 or 5 times, and my managers finally said, you know, they really want you to do this thing. We need it to publicize the show. So it was all ABC stars, who, what do you do? I'm an actor. They're all actors and press. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to die a horrible death here. So I couldn't have been more nervous for that show. So I'm backstage before the show, and Robin Williams comes backstage because we had the same managers, and he walked me to the stage as if he were a priest walking someone to the to the electric chair. you know, like he's reading a prayer book and walked me, my final walk before I died there. Uh, Fortunately, I had a good set and it worked out. And Richard Dawson, who was guest hosting the Tonight Show, actually asked me after the show if I would do the Tonight Show when he guest hosted again. So I had a good set to turn out, but it was so frightening and so out of my comfort zone at that point.
Now they played that show
So I
out of
didn't
the
know,
blue.
and I would see Robin then in the clubs, and he was always very nice to me. And uh, the last time that I saw Robin before he passed away, um, when I first started out in New York, I would wear a sweater that buttoned up because it was always cold on the subway when I was going back to Brooklyn, and it was too hot to wear on stage a pullover sweater. So I would wear a button-up sweater, and I would end my act every night saying, "I've got to go now. I've got to get these clothes back to Mr. Rogers." That was my big,
Love it.
my big finish. Yeah. And the first time I ever went on the road, they lost my luggage, and I didn't have my sweater, and I thought, I can't perform. I don't have my big finish. But anyway, so last time I saw Robin was down at the Comedy Magic Club in Costa Beach. He came in one Sunday night when I was working with Jay, and he hugged me and said, "Oh, Mr. Rogers." Yeah. So 30 years later, yeah, he remembered that joke.
Uh,
Very sweet.
Now this is a selfish question for me. What
Okay.
did Seinfeld always had this big ego that he's better than everybody else, or no?
Oh, I started with Jerry in New York, and saw him the first week he was performing at the comic strip, and you know, we became friends. And the first time we really sat down and had a conversation, because Jerry started about maybe a year after me,
Mm,
and and uh, and they really liked him at the comic strip and kind of promoted him up. They wanted to kind of build their own acts there because when the comic strip had just opened and uh, the other acts there were all playing the other clubs as well. So they wanted to have their own kind of brand. So
mm,
they picked up Larry Miller and Jerry Seinfeld to kind of promote up. So Jerry was kind of moved up early on, and they were both very good. Larry was a wonderful performer, and Jerry had great material. And
right.
I'll tell you a story actually about those two guys. On April Fool's Day, they would switch acts. Larry Miller, who was a great performer, and Jerry, who had great material. And Larry would just kill with Jerry's material.
Oh, that's
And then,
funny.
then Jerry would go up and do Larry's act, which was all about performing. and Jerry would just struggle with Larry's act. So it was very funny. They would switch acts on April Fool's Day. But
Uh,
so Jerry and I then got a gig together in Philadelphia. And this is the first time I really sat down and had a conversation. I mean, we knew each other in clubs, and we talked about how we were both fans of Larry David. Was our first conversation. And of course,
wow.
Jerry went on to, create Seinfeld, Larry David, and then Larry went on. Yeah. But that's always our first conversation was how we were both fans of Larry David.
Was Larry David a stand-up? Did he do stand-up before?
He did. He was a stand-up in the clubs. He had started ahead of me. So he was already a regular at the Improv when I started, which was a big deal in New York to pass the auditions and, be a regular in the club. So he was already a regular when I started and just inventive and funny but was frustrated at performing. When I'd work my way up to MC after a couple of years. So I was MCing in the clubs, including the Improv. And I would bring up Larry and go, Larry David. And then, you normally have 20 minutes where you go out to the bar and hang around with the other comics. And then, you go up and introduce the next act and stuff. That was your night as the MC. But with Larry, it was, okay, Larry David, I go out to the bar and I'd be sitting there about 30 seconds. And one of the waitresses would yell from the room, "He's off stage." And I'd have to run on stage, having no idea what happened. Larry had walked off stage. He just couldn't, for some reason, he would just get frustrated either with the audience or himself, and just look at the audience and go, "No," and walk off. And
So
as
that's
MC,
him.
you didn't have any idea whether there'd been a heckler or something happened, or if it got ugly, or just So Larry just didn't really have the disposition to face an audience like that every night early on, and he was great. I mean, he was the comedian that Jerry and I talked about. You know,
Uh,
we're starting out. So
Now you had you had your sitcom before the all these guys, and they aired 9 episodes only. And have you
mhm.
ever thought when you were there, like, man, this is it. This is what's gonna make my career huge. This is sitcom's gonna go for 5 years. It's gonna have reruns. Were you frustrated when it was canceled, and then you weren't on the next one?
uh, no, not really. I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity, and it brought me out to Hollywood. And because of that, I was then, a regular at the Comedy Store and the Improv, the big clubs out here. And whereas, other acts, like, Seinfeld, Larry Miller, we talked about when they moved out here, they had to start at the bottom. No one knew who they were. So it was really a wonderful opportunity. It gave me acting experience, and it was great. I mean, it wasn't the funniest show, and was canceled early on, but uh, it was great experience, and the cast was wonderful, and I'm still in touch with the kids on Facebook who played the kids in the show, and they're
Oh,
not kids
they're
anymore.
not
Yeah,
kids anymore, right?
well, they're not at all. Yeah, but it's wonderful that we're still pals.
Have you ever went like, wow, what do you call it? You look at someone else, you go, man, I'm fun. Yeah, I'm just playing the comedian's mind. Like, oh, I'm
Um,
funnier. I envy their success. Have you ever had that feeling?
no, I think I learned early on. I was first starting out when we were all trying to audition for the same clubs. Uh, trying to get into Catch a Rising Star or the Improv or the Comic Strip in New York. There was just, it was hard to pass the auditions there because they had a full lineup of comics already, so it was hard to break into that. But I realized once we all became kind of regulars in these clubs, that we all kind of had different skill sets, and
Mm,
you know what I was right for was different from what someone else was right for. So yeah, so we weren't competitors. There was
mm.
enough room and enough different variety of things for everybody. Like Jay Leno became a talk show host. Jerry did his own uh, sitcom, and Larry David then his own sitcom eventually. So there was a kind of a path for everyone.
That's amazing. I love your personality. You're just like you're like you're a godly person, just like you have this heart and that's not normal, and that's why I was playing the comedian who would ask, oh, I envy this, I wish if my sitcom would have stayed, I would have been here or I would have been there. But you seem very satisfied with Korean life. If a beautiful young lady came to you right now, kind of within 5 years from your age, and said, hey, I would like to marry you. With you. Are you open to getting married?
Oh, well, I suppose, but it would be a big change, I imagine, for each of us. Because I've been single for so long. Yeah. I mean, my co-author in the book, Matt Wolfhard, said the other day, I was thinking about drawing my underwear on the ceiling fan. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that
That's
makes
just,
sense. And then I thought, well, that's probably not going to fly in a relationship. Yeah.
well, if you tie it good to the fan, it won't fly. But
That's one thing. It seems reasonable to me.
that's all. What is next? You wrote the book, and now the book is on Amazon. I'm going to show the book again just for
Thank
people
you.
who just joined us. And says 79 reasons you might be a lifelong bachelor. And you can get it on Amazon. And also, you don't have to be single to read it. It's funny for married people to appreciate, kind of. Oh yeah, I don't do that. Therefore, I'm so fortunate to be married. So stuff like that. But
Yes, but my sister, she and her husband bought the book, and he would read jokes to her, and she said she didn't realize she'd been married to a bachelor all these years because he was cleaning the shower with a toilet brush. She thought, okay, I'm married to a guy who should be a bachelor. Yeah.
now you traveled probably millions of miles for comedy all over the world. Anything funny sticks to you? Anything happened that was like crazy, funny, or embarrassing or something?
I was not the road guy that a lot of comics were. Uh,
Mm.
because I worked for the Tonight Show for 9 years in the 90s, kept me in town. And in the 80s, I did warm-ups for sitcoms. So
Oh,
I made a nice, living
right.
just doing warm-ups. I did Cheers, I did Newhart, I did Taxi, I did the pilot for Seinfeld. Jerry asked me to do him a favor. And
Oh,
then I would do when Jerry, in the original show, there was more stand up that Jerry did. In syndication, they'd cut out some of the stand up so the story part would hold up because in syndication, the shows are slightly shorter than they were on the network. But
oh,
Jerry would do a bunch of stand up, and I would go and do the warm up for Jerry in the nightclubs and the nightclub set on the Seinfeld set. Uh,
oh,
you know,
oh, yeah.
every every month or so, I would go over there and they would do 3 or 4 shows worth of stand up to drop in, and I would keep the audience entertained while Jerry went and changed clothes and did that. So I did a lot of warm ups, and I'll tell you a warm up story of I was doing the Newhart show, which
Uh-huh.
was just a delight. That Bob Newhart would come out and he would do 10 minutes of material before the show, just stand up material. And, as a stand up who just, love Newhart, love those guys who came before us, that were standing on their shoulders. Uh, they were paying me to watch Newhart every week. So, so I'm doing the art, and generally it was great. The audiences were good. And, it was just a dream job. But it was done on film, and it would take 3 hours to film the 30-minute show. It was a long time. They would shoot the scenes over again. And, they would have to change film for every 10 minutes of film. They'd have to change film in the cameras, and they'd have to
Right.
change the batteries on the cameras, and so it just took forever. So one night I'm absolutely bombing. The first hour I'm getting absolutely nothing. I
Nothing.
mean, everyone where they're from, what they do for a living. No one wants to talk to me. The second hour, I'm just still getting nothing, and the third hour it's just getting worse and just horrible. And finally, I say to the audience, maybe you've got some jokes. And a little girl raised her hand, like an 8-year-old girl, and she says, "I've got a joke, Mister." I go, "Oh," and I'm so relieved that someone talked to me. "Oh, I've got a joke. Tell me a joke." She said, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" I said, "Oh, I don't know why the chicken crossed the road." And she said, "To get away from the warm-up man."
Oh,
And
oh
it got
no.
the it got the only laugh of the night. It got a huge laugh from the audience, enough that the cast turned around and looked up to see what possibly could be getting a laugh from the audience. And so, yes, I'm heckled and topped by an 8-year-old girl.
And they said that was a great warm up guy if he got that big of a laugh. Oh, wow.
So,
Now,
uh,
y- you worked with a lot of celebrities. And yeah, just being on the Tonight Show and doing your own show and doing different. We don't want dirt. This is a good, clean. We're good people
uh,
here. But who was the nicest act you worked with?
oh, well, just, you know, uh, I mean, people like Steve Allen was gracious to me. I did a benefit with him one time and then ran into him at a couple other shows that we ended up doing together. And, guys like that were just, wonderful. And I met George Burns once.
Oh,
This was, a generation or two ahead of us, really, someone from, vaudeville at George
yeah.
Burns, yeah, toward the end of his life. Uh, and I met him down at the Improv one night. Bud Friedman, who was the owner of the Improv, said, "Oh, would you like to meet George Burns?" And I go, "Well, yeah." So he introduced me to George Burns, and Bud says, "Oh, here's a young comedian just moved out from New York." And I said, "Oh, nice to meet you, Mr. Burns." And George Burns leans into me with a cigar and says, "Don't tell everybody how easy this is." So we just had that little moment of comedians, from different generations, and a comedian from the 30s, talking to someone from the 80s, just and we were just two comedians talking, just a thrill.
Who's your rate? Who's, I mean, that's hard a question, but who's your favorite comic? You think like this comedian has it all, just perfect material,
Oh,
delivery, timing.
ah,
I
well,
know that's
I was
hard.
always I was always a Jack Benny fan growing up. Just his timing and the fact that he was just it's kind of soft spoken and polite and just the timing of his the fact that he could pause and wait and let us in uh, is something I teach comedy to kids sometimes and it's one of the hardest things for them is to understand that pause that silence is really good for comedy between the setup and the punchline. I can't tell you how many times I've said to the kids, just pause there. Pause there. Let the setup land before you get to the punchline. And
That's
Jack Benny did that better than anybody.
Who do you like in the newer generation of comedians, the ones that came after? I know I was in between your big, the big boom in comedy. That was your generation when just like
Yeah,
all the comics, a lot of comics made it. And
yeah,
then it came my generation where it was like, okay, the comics were going to shows, TV shows, doing TV and everything. And but now there's a new generation of comedians. What do you think? Who, if you think, but how has that changed? How has comedy now changed than when the golden days of comedy that you were in?
Oh, well, there's some really good comics. I'm sorry, I hit the table here. Jim Gaffigan's wonderful. Uh, Brian Reagan's great. Kathleen Madigan is just unbelievable. I saw Kathleen Madigan do a thing. This was maybe a year or so ago, where she told a story. I saw this on YouTube about going to Paris with her mom for some sort of TV taping thing, and it was so funny to me. And I thought, oh my goodness, she's such a great comedian. So I sent her an email afterwards and said, "Gee, that was just terrific." And she said, "Oh yeah, I've never done that story before, anywhere else before or since." This was the one time she
One
ever
time, and
done it.
she got it
And
down.
I was she. I mean, that's how talented she is. She could do a story for first time ever, and it was as funny as anything. I just great. So she's wonderful. Gaffigan is just unbelievable. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of great comics, and I've been watching some of the people that come through the dry bar comedy, uh,
Yes.
and my goodness, there's some great people that have done that. And I'd say, gee, if I were booking the Tonight Show at this point, I would put these people on right away. These would be the first people I call. They're
Wow,
terrific.
that's an
Yeah.
So, in the last 3 minutes, I know this went fast, and I have a lot of questions, but
Oh, it's that fast? Oh, I didn't realize
yeah,
that. Oh, that's
it's
fine.
it's it's been an hour. Now, what advice do you have to single people who are like they don't see? They go, "Am I always gonna be a bachelor? Am I always gonna be single? Or is it that bad if I'm always gonna be single?" What do you say to them?
You know, I have a nice life and I'm happy and have good friends and friends with, some of my old sweeties and, we're still in touch and I still hold them close in my heart. So it's nice. Um, but I'll, I was thinking about a little advice earlier on because I know that you generally ask the comedians for advice at the end of your
Yes.
podcast here. And what I was thinking today was, um, in religion you learn a lot. Love thy neighbor, don't hurt your neighbor. But I would add something to that is, don't hurt other people and don't hurt yourself. I started with a lot of comics who, got sidetracked with, drugs and, becoming alcoholics and stuff and, kind of lost their prime years. And
Mm.
the friends that smoke who, I don't know, are just shortening their lives. So uh, my best advice is, don't hurt other people and don't hurt yourself.
That's a great advice. That's a great advice. And what do you? What advice do you have for? Okay, I think my picture is gone. So, what
Uh,
advice
I
do
can
you
still hear you.
have for comedians, younger comics? What do you say to them? What advice can you give them?
Well, what helped me the most was just stage time, was just getting on stage a lot. I mean, I wasn't a natural performer. Sorry, I mean, I had performed, once for 10 minutes at Notre Dame. And, I really had to learn how to be a performer. And so, uh, the first year I did stand up, I probably did uh, 100 shows maybe, and then next year 150. And then by my third year, I had done 300 shows or 305 shows that year. So I thought, oh, that's good. I'm averaging a show a day. And by my fourth year, I had done 1,000 shows that year. So, that year, my fourth year of doing 1,000 shows, that got me better. Just,
Mm.
whatever happened on stage, I had seen it before. I had done so many shows and, doing 6 shows a night, I just got comfortable on stage. So that's what made the difference for me. And, you know, then writing is the other big thing. And, Seinfeld's the man for that. So, write every day and get up on stage and try it out.
That's amazing. Jim, thank you so much for being taking this time to be with us. And I just want to remind people that the book is available, 79 Reasons You Might Be a Lifelong Bachelor, is available on Amazon. And are you back to the Comedy and Magic Club now in Hermosa or not?
Not quite yet. When it opens up, I'm sure we'll be back again.
Y-
And
You'll
yeah,
be.
January and Sunday.
You and Jay Leno will be every Sunday night at the Comedy and Magic Club in Hermosa Beach, California. Maybe I'll stop by and say hello to you in person. Uh,
Please,
love
anytime,
you,
anytime.
man. You
Love
are
it.
you are a class act. You are a great, wonderful man, and I'm just honored to call you a friend. And I appreciate you so much. How can people get a hold of you if they want to
Uh,
book you for comedy or speaking?
through my website, jimbroganonline.com.
JimBroganOnline.com. Perfect. Thank you so much. It's so good to have you. And people who are listening, thank you so much for watching and listening. Want to remind you every night at 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, every weeknight 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, the Live with Nash show will be on YouTube and on Facebook under Comedian Nazareth. You can laugh with us for an hour, and we can encourage you at the end of the show. Love you guys and thank you so much for watching. And please subscribe to the podcast if you're not. God bless you and have a great night. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Nazareth.